Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video, and today's topic is once again Sekiro's difficulty. I'm actually tired of talking about this, which is why I haven't been posting videos recently. I've been enjoying Sekiro for what it is and doing the completionist thing, going after all the endings and trophies, and yet every time I look through my newsfeed, someone else is talking about the problem that is Sekiro's difficulty. I've tried being reasonable about this. I've tried explaining to people why it is important that these games are challenging, but it's almost like they cover their ears and go, la 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 la, I can't hear you, Sekiro needs an easy mode, la 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 la. So I figure, hey, if being reasonable doesn't work, maybe I'll just have to beat them down with facts, and maybe then they'll listen. Nah, who am I kidding? They'll just ignore me and run away to the accessibility argument, which, to be quite frank, is insulting to the community of disabled gamers. I don't think they need able-bodied gamers to tell them what is and isn't too hard for them to do, but yet here they are. The social justice warriors demanding yet again for everyone to bend over backwards for them. I'm tired of it, and I'm tired of trying my hardest to be respectful only to repeatedly be disrespected in return and called an elitist gatekeeper when anyone who knows literally anything about me is aware of my efforts to bring more people into games they wouldn't usually play because they're either perceived to be too hard or too complex. But hey, to hell with everything I've done so far because I refuse to budge on the topic of challenge in From Software games. So here we are, and this is a hill I am willing to die on. Let's begin. First and foremost, there are literally thousands of video games you can be playing right now that are not as challenging as Sekiro and have multiple difficulty options that allow you to tailor the experience to your needs. However, when you flip that around, there aren't that many games that provide the same level of challenge as Sekiro. Not even close. But Rui, plenty of games have difficulty options. You said so yourself on your previous statement. Yes. And most of those difficulty options are garbage because most of those games are tailored around a normal difficulty that anyone can beat. And once you crank up the difficulty, you'll find bosses now have ridiculous amounts of hit points, making every fight a tedious grind. It's not challenging, it's just boring and requires you to repeat the same pattern over an unreasonable amount of time, which quite simply doesn't even feel rewarding when you're done because you didn't win by becoming better at the game. You won because you were patient enough to chip away at that health bar over a long period of time. From Software doesn't do that. Its bosses feel challenging from a mechanical standpoint, not because they have a ridiculous amount of hit points. And this kind of challenge is a key aspect of the sense of achievement you get when you finally overcome that obstacle. A core part of the experience is overcoming what appears to be an impossible fight, and Sekiro excels at that. An easy mode will completely undermine this system. And I always find it interesting that the most people debating this topic don't seem to understand how the game actually works. Sekiro is so finely tuned that any adjustment that is made to its difficulty will trivialize most boss fights. First, let's make something clear. The only challenging portion of Sekiro are the boss fights. 99% of everything else can be stealth killed, and it doesn't even require that much skill in terms of timing or execution. Any statement to the contrary is factually wrong and probably made by someone who doesn't understand how the game works. Now, when you get to boss fights, the simplest way to make them easier is to reduce their damage or their health points and increase the player's own damage or health points. If you adjust those values slightly, it makes no real difference. You're talking about allowing players to take one more hit or the bosses requiring one less hit to break posture, because that's just how the game works mechanically. So you're talking about a significant shift in those values, which will basically allow players to brute force a boss's posture gauge, removing any challenge whatsoever from the equation. The bosses in Sekiro are a puzzle. Once you find the solution, it just requires practice. But the crux of the matter is everyone sees death as failure, and therefore gets them motivated. In Sekiro, maybe even more than previous titles, because dying causes you to lose resources you can't recover, and your NPCs begin to become sick with dragon rot. It's like you're so bad at this game, you're literally giving the NPCs cancer. But what you need to understand is that death is a learning tool, and there are no participation trophies in Sekiro. It's not going to hold your hand and tell you everything is okay like most other games do. It is going to have faith that you have the strength to persevere and learn from your failures in order to overcome the obstacle that's been placed in front of you. Is it frustrating? Yes, it's supposed to be. That's why it feels so good when you actually beat the bosses. One of the arguments I keep hearing is time, as in, I don't have time to learn Sekiro. And look, I'm not in the position to argue against that because time is the most valuable commodity in the world. You can always get more money. What you can never get back is time. Once it passes, it's gone forever. But I will argue if you carved out an hour a day to play Sekiro, what else would you rather play? An easier game where you can progress more easily? Go for it. But if that is your situation, why would you buy a game from a studio that has a reputation for making challenging games? So you can then make the argument that you don't have time to learn how to play the challenging game? It just doesn't make that much sense to me. Not every game needs to appeal to the mainstream market. In fact, I would go as far as to say less games need to appeal to the mainstream market, because I always seem to find my favorite experiences in games that aren't trying to appeal to as many people as possible, but instead carve out a tailored experience for a select group of individuals that really appreciate it. Or as Marcus, epic name bro, once said, when you make a game for everyone, you make a game for no one. You see, the people that like Sekiro really like Sekiro. It's not going to be a game they play and forget about a year from now. It's a game that will stay with them for a long time, just like any in the Souls series. And for everyone that wants an easier experience, there's Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Red Dead Redemption 2, Spider-Man, Witcher 3. The list goes on and on and on. You don't have to play Sekiro. Guess what? I can't beat some of Mario Maker's harder levels. Hell, I probably can't even beat some of the easier ones. I'm just not that great at platformers. Should I demand that those levels get an easy mode so I can play them? Not a good example. Well, I probably won't be able to beat Getting Over It either. Should that game get an easy mode so I can beat it? Or should I maybe just choose not to play that game? And like this, I can give you thousands of examples of other popular games I'm simply never going to be good at because I'm not willing to invest the time it would take to get good at those games. But what I'm not going to do is ask those games to change their systems to accommodate my needs. Not every video game you play has to be custom tailored to you. Every game you play is an option. Another argument I see a lot is the books and movies argument. If I buy a movie, I can watch it. If I get a book, I can read it. I bought Sekiro, therefore I should be able to finish it. Well, to me, that argument is a fundamental misunderstanding of the type of media you are consuming. You don't get to finish a game just because you bought it. Well, I guess nowadays you kind of can, which is sad, really. But ultimately, you should only get to finish a game if you are good enough at playing it. Video games are interactive. The outcome should depend on your ability. I don't come to video games with the same expectations as movies or books. I find that particular argument ridiculous. And finally, we get to accessibility, which I'm sure is going to be the main argument people that disagree with me will turn to again. What about the disabled gamers, Rui? And first and foremost, if you are not handicapped, please stop using them as an excuse for an easy mode in a video game. It's downright disrespectful. And second, you can see in this footage right here, a quadriplegic gamer beating one of the toughest bosses in the game with a regular Xbox controller. In this footage, which I will blur to prevent spoilers, he's actually fighting what I consider to be the hardest boss in the game, and he succeeds. And now you'll say, well, different people have different disabilities, and I agree. So how far should From Software go to accommodate for disabilities? Should the game be playable by the blind? Like, look, I'm really sorry if someone has physical limitations that prevent them from enjoying this game, but an easy mode isn't going to help because quite simply it destroys the artist's vision. Now, if you want to talk about support for custom controllers, full button remapping, colorblind modes, speech controls, and any other accessibility options, I'm right there with you. I will support you and your argument in any way I can. I will sign your petition, subscribe your newsletter, and pledge your Patreon. But if you want to argue for increased player damage and lower boss hit points, you've already lost me. Sorry. I don't really have a segue for this. Let's just jump into this article from PC Gamer. I beat Sekiro's final boss with cheats and I feel fine. James Davenport over here feels so fine, in fact, that immediately after cheating and essentially robbing himself of any sense of achievement he could have gotten from beating Sekiro's final boss, he felt the need to run over to the internet and write a little article to seek validation from his peers who have also been struggling to beat Sekiro. Well, congratulations on ruining the experience for yourself. I hope you enjoy your hollow victory. Quote, an hour or so in, I slowed the action down by 50% with the intent to study the final boss's moveset. I plan on leaping off the cliff once I get cozy, and then juicing up the speed back to normal, but it feels too good to stop. That's strangely sexual there, James. So I finished the guy off in slow motion. Okay. Watch a predictably brief from ending, I got the good one too, and let the credits roll. The adrenal high, the sense of accomplishment, the themes and motifs and memories are still flowing through me. Nothing is lost. I love this damn game. End quote. I would argue everything is lost. The feeling you got, James, was a false feeling of relief because you felt like you were done with the game and you could move on, but in a couple of months, you'll come to regret it. Or maybe not. Who knows? Maybe I'm just a relic at this point. Maybe my stance is outdated and all video games should be watered down to appeal to everyone. Sacrifice everything under a veil of inclusivity. Maybe games shouldn't even be challenging anymore. Maybe as a community we're past that. Maybe the correct line of thinking is that games should be more like movies and anyone who buys them should get to see the ending regardless of the creator's vision. But if that is where we are now, then I'm getting off the bus. I like Sekiro just as it is, and I firmly believe this desire for an easy mode stems from laziness and complacency from people who have no desire to hone their skills as gamers and overcome the challenging gameplay presented before them. People who have played too many open world games with their checklist mechanics where there's a map marker guiding you to your next objective, a detailed list of tasks that you can do, and multiple trackers for several side activities you can engage in. Never mind the fact that you've been playing the same game since Assassin's Creed 2 or Far Cry 3 under a different skin, doing essentially the same actions to the point where you can't even fathom what gaming was like before you had all those markers and maps and towers and side activities to provide your brain with a steady drip of dopamine. Man, it must have been harsh when the first general mini-boss thoroughly ripped through you because you didn't even bother to read the tutorial pop-ups to understand the basic combat mechanics of deflecting and jumping over sweep attacks. Now this next piece comes to us from Inside Gaming, who apparently did a video talking about the difficulty in Sekiro. A video that I personally watched, and it was so mild that by the end I barely even understood what their stance on the original topic of the video was. But for some reason they felt the need to apologize for a piece of content that wasn't even that offensive to begin with. And they even took the video down. Here's what they had to say. We extend our apologies to anyone who received hateful or demeaning messages based on our work. Our goal is only to celebrate, uplift, and enjoy gaming. On Sunday, we published a video titled Sekiro Doesn't Need an Easy Mode. Our intent with this video was not to state that Sekiro shouldn't have an easy mode, or that the presence of one would ruin the creator's intended experience. And again, personal comment here, it most definitely would. Continuing, our statement is that all things being equal, we as consumers of art cannot expect that art to conform to our individual worldviews and experiences. But that only works if all things are equal, and in this world they often aren't. The video was not intended to comment on the value of accessibility options, though it's become clear the two issues are linked. And this is where I'm going to be stopping because I completely disagree. There is such a thing as accessibility where you're talking about colorblind modes, custom controllers, all that stuff that we talked about before. And then there's difficulty. These are two very, very, very different things. And in my personal assessment of Sekiro, specifically in the case of Sekiro, I'm not saying that this is a universal truth, but in the case of Sekiro and with the mechanics of Sekiro, I do not believe that lowering the difficulty is going to make the game significantly easier for anyone. Increasing accessibility options, I'm all for that. However, changing difficulty, it's not really going to help people. Continuing onwards, some are using our reasoning to justify statements of exclusion, which is not what we are about. And I've already stated repeatedly throughout this particular video that I am here to bring as many people as possible into these games. Okay? as many people as those that are willing to learn and willing to put in the effort. But there is a limit to how you can develop a game and how inclusive it can actually be. Like I said earlier, if someone is blind, like, what can we do? I'm sorry, I really am. But anyway, continuing onwards with my points, I'm gonna stop reading from their stuff. Basically, my point with all this is not every game should be for everyone, because different people have different tastes in games. There's nothing wrong if you enjoy more streamlined experiences like Assassin's Creed or Far Cry, and I hope you continue to enjoy those for years to come. I genuinely do. There is, however, everything wrong in buying a game that is known for its level of challenge and then expecting that game to compromise on its creator's vision because you're not willing to learn its mechanics. And finally, for the people that ask, how does an easy mode affect your experience with the game? It doesn't affect my personal initial experience. It, however, affects the entire community. One of the main reasons there are so many people creating content for these games, exploring every little piece of lore in the world, learning and teaching strategies, is because they are challenging and because they don't spoon-feed the narrative to their players. The Souls community is one of the most vibrant communities in gaming because the challenging nature of From Software's games is what led to its creation. And a majority of the community are not gatekeeping elitists. It's quite the opposite. It's one of the most inclusive and encouraging communities I've ever seen. It's just a shame that people choose to focus on the few bad apples as their example of an otherwise fantastic group of gamers. Gaming is about bringing people together, not excluding them. And I will continue to try and bring as many people as I can to the games that I love. I'll keep taking the criticism and being called an elitist and a gatekeeper because I know that in the end, I just want as many as possible to experience that sense of accomplishment that comes with beating a hard boss. We have a long road ahead of us, Ironbreakers. Keep setting the example and don't let anyone break your spirit. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you disagree with me, hit the dislike button. If you'd like to stay up to date with my content, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Stay strong and may your shields never break.